I'm not on, am I? Now I am. Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started. And can you guess where we are tonight? Proverbs 18. And again, you can follow along with the readings that will be up there, or if you want to open your own Bibles to there. I do want to mention, I was just told right before services that Sheila Kellogg's dad is in very serious condition. He's having kidney failure and has been taken to the hospital, and I think that it's a pretty grim prognosis from what I was told just a while ago. So we need to certainly keep Sheila and her family in our prayers. Where would be a good place to start in Proverbs 18? Verse 1? Is that what you said, Phil? Well, that's where we're going to go, verse 1. Well, I think that'll be a good place for us to start. Unfriendly people care only about themselves. They lash out at common sense. Now, I want to read this one also from the that translation from the New American Standard Bible. Okay? One who separates himself seeks his own desire. He quarrels against all sound wisdom. Here Solomon appears to be describing someone who is only looking out for their own interests. They're not serving others. They're not helping others. In other words, they are isolated due to self-centered desires. And the reason I want to emphasize that is I think sometimes it's important for us to isolate ourselves. Okay? For instance, Jesus certainly did, didn't he? He did so that he could get in touch with the Father more fully. You know, a mom with small children might want to slip away and get a little nap, have a little isolation time. Yeah, the truth is all of us need some alone time with God, right? I mean, we really do. And as I'm talking on Sunday mornings right now, our pace of life is so fast right now, we're making that really difficult for ourselves, but we need that. But God made us as social creatures. Now, I know that there's some people that are, we all have different kinds of personalities, and some of us are more introverted than others. I would be one of those. But even in my introverted nature, I still need other people. And to only listen to your own advice is not wise. There's this verse that later in Proverbs, it says, as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. You see, we need that in our lives. What does this really speak to? Well, I think it's speaking to accountability. We need people who will hold us to accountability, who will help us to sharpen ourselves. And so I believe that this proverb and others like it are calling us to recognize the value of community, the value of being accountable to other people. There are many Christians, and this pandemic has just escalated the speed at which it's happening. But there are many Christians who are buying into this lie that they can live the Christian faith in isolation, that they don't need the church as we know it. And there's little, if any, involvement in faith community or any other kind of community. But John Donne famously wrote many years ago, "No man is an island." And that's true. We all need people in our lives, and it's to our detriment when we separate ourselves from people. Verse 2, fools have no interest in understanding. They only want to air their own opinions. Huh? Know-it-alls? Well, social media offers proof that this is true, doesn't it? I mean, all of a sudden people have this platform where they think they can just get on there and say whatever they want to say, and oh, aren't they so wise because someone else agrees with them. We all have opinions, but from what this is saying is it's better for us to seek understanding with each other than it is for us to spout our opinions on everything, right? Verse 4, I'm going to skip verse 3. Verse 4, wise words are like deep waters. Wisdom flows from the wise like a bubbling brook. Sometimes there's the wording of Solomon I get such a good word picture with it. Doesn't this just give you a good word picture here? Our words really do reveal our souls. And from what this is saying, it doesn't just reveal our souls, but it comes from the really deep places of our souls. A bubbling brook. What does that speak of to you, other than the only a little, oh, that was a babbling brook, wasn't it? Only a little boy David and only a babbling brook. I'm really proud that I even remember that. It's pretty old. Thank you, Mike, for the reminder. But a bubbling brook, what does that speak about to you? Wisdom flows from the wise like a bubbling brook. Okay. Yeah, we all like the sound of water in that way, don't we? But a bubbling brook, that's the place of refreshment. This is just a fun, interesting observation. Beverly and I have been, when there's not a good series of a program that we're following, sometimes we like to watch old westerns. Let me say, I like to watch old westerns, and Beverly kind of goes along, okay? So we're watching The Virginian. I'd never seen that show when I was growing up, and it's a really good show. Good acting, good storylines. But they had this one spot they'd often go to where there's this waterfall and then there's this pool right there. But every time they would go there to get water in their canteen, where were they getting the water from? Down where it was a pool, where the water was just sitting there. No, you don't. You go to the bubbling brook. You go to the waterfall to get your water. And to me, that's kind of what I see in this too. A bubbling brook, it's the place of refreshment. It's the source of life. Okay? Well, I learned from Boy Scouts that you need to always, if you're going to drink out of a brook, you drink after it's run over rock for at least, I think it was 20 or 30 feet. You know, you don't go to the stagnant pool to get your water. Okay. Other than that, it was a pretty good show. Verse 5. It is not right to acquit the guilty or deny justice to the innocent. Now, this is going back to the theme that we saw a lot in chapter 17 last week, the justice theme. Favoritism is condemned by God. In many ways, favoritism is condemned by God, but it's very specific in Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 15. And so, it's not good for us to be found on the side that we are standing for wickedness, but it's equally not good for us to be standing on the side that is standing against righteousness either. Okay? I'm going to do two verses together because these two kind of speak the same, they're on the same theme. Fools' words get them into constant quarrels. They're asking for a beating. The mouths of fools are their ruin. They trap themselves with their lips. In other words, we'll be judged by our words. Jesus makes this statement. And you've heard it, but we got to wrestle with it for a minute. He said, you must give an account on Judgment Day for every idle word you speak. The words you say will either acquit you or condemn you. Now, what do you make of that verse? And be careful how you answer it. Because if we're going to take it literally, Okay, that's true. But is there any one of us that has any hope in eternity if these words are literally to be taken? And literally is not the right word that I even want to use here. If we just take this as a strict command, do any of us have any hope? So what do we do with it? I don't want to be condemned for my words, do you? Sometimes Jesus used language where he was just really trying to drive home the importance of a point. And I think that's what he's doing here. And he's really driving home the importance of that we really need to taste our words. And we're going to get more into that in just a moment. We need to be careful about the words we choose because our words are going to come back to bite us. Okay, verse 8. Rumors are dainty morsels that sink deep into one's heart. This is another good word picture, isn't it? Is there anything, any food that you like that you know once you eat one, you're not going to be able to stop? You know, Lay's potato chips used to advertise themselves in that way, but is there anything that's like that for you? Unfortunately, I just finished a meal with something like that. Once I get started on chips and salsa, I can't stop. They better bring the food quickly because as long as I don't have the food, I'm going to be eating it. Anything like that with you? Sweets? Okay. Mm. Well, and the old word for compassion actually has more about a feeling in your gut than it does your heart. So it could be kind of that same kind of reference there. But Solomon's saying, in the same way that there's some foods that once we taste them, we just can't stop. He's saying rumors and gossip are like that. Once you get a morsel of it, you're going to have more. It's going to create a hunger and a desire for more. But we can resist rumors and gossip in the same way that we can resist those foods that we can't stop eating. If you know that you have a problem with a particular food and once you start eating it you can't stop, what do you have to do? Don't start, right? It's a discipline. Don't start. Don't open the box. If you don't take the first bite, you won't get to bite number 2 and bite number 3. And the same thing is true with rumors and gossip. Don't let it start. But there's probably few of us who are bold enough to, when someone comes up and begins telling us some juicy bit of gossip, that we can say, no, I don't want to hear it. That's probably the best response we could have. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, let's go to verse 9. A lazy person is as bad as someone who destroys things. I'm sorry, guys. I sat with this one for a long time trying to figure out something I wanted to say about it, but I can't make the connection here. This is not one that I have a good word picture for. How is a lazy person like someone who destroys something? I'm missing it. Well, I mean, yeah, both of them end in not the best of situations, but I just don't see. Tell me what I'm missing if someone sees something there. Phil? Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and sometimes Eugene Peterson, even though he wasn't literal, he had a good way of getting behind what really was trying to be communicated. Um, and my conclusion on it then is about what Peterson's would have been. And I didn't read the Message on this one, but to me it kind of just goes back to the idea that a disciple of Jesus is someone who's always going to give a full day's work or a fair day's work for a fair day's wage. I mean, we're going to be responsible. So, that gets us through the first. Hold off on that one just for a second, Leanne, if you don't mind. Yeah. Okay, before we get to the next verse, I want to ask you, would you agree that where or in whom we put our trust matters? Okay? Because there's this saying, and you'll hear people say this occasionally. Go to that next slide. When Jesus is all you've got, you realize he's all you need. You like that? Here's the thing with that. At the same time, that conveys a comforting thought, but also conveys a frightening thought, doesn't it? And here's why. It's frightening because it seems to say that until we have nothing, that we don't really know that Jesus is all we need. Right? And so, what will we have to go through in order to come to understand this truth that Jesus is all we need? That's a scary thought, isn't it? I don't know where this saying came from, but I feel like it may be an adaptation of the next proverb I want to read, which is verse 10. It says, "The name of Yahweh is a strong fortress. The godly run to him and are safe." Unless we find ourselves in some kind of distress, it's not likely that we're going to feel a need to run to a fortified tower or to a fortress, right? But how else are we going to learn that Jesus is all we need if we're always able to take care of all of our needs? Well, but that's just the fact of the matter. So this is why it's both a comforting thought and at the same time somewhat frightening. We are currently living in a time when our fears and our uncertainties are heightened. Some of that's self-imposed. Some of it's because of what we're listening to. But the fact of the matter is we're living in a time like that. And the safe places in our culture seem to be constantly changing. But this verse reminds us of something. This verse reminds us that we can always run to God. And it doesn't just say that he is a fortress. It doesn't just say in other translations that he is a tower. What does it say? He's a strong fortress. He's a strong tower. In other words, nothing can pull him over or push him over. Nothing can tear him down. And understand, when you read in the Old Testament about the name of the Lord, what's being described in that phrase, the name of the Lord, is the character of the Lord, okay? It's his character. And his character is the same tomorrow as it is today. His character is unchanging. And we can always find a strong, safe refuge in him. What are we going to face in the days ahead? I don't know. Any of you know? We don't know, do we? My guess is that if history continues its trend, there's going to be things that we're going to face that are going to be really good, and there's going to be things we face that aren't going to be so good. That's pretty much the way life seems to go. But we can know this, that who God is today, he's going to be tomorrow. And so we can run to him, and we can find complete safety. But, as good a news as that is, not everyone's going to put their trust in God. So what's the next proverb say? Verse 11. The rich think of their wealth as a strong defense. Now what's he just said? Yahweh is a strong defense, right? The rich think of their wealth as a strong defense. They imagine it to be a high wall of safety. Now, in thinking that their wealth is a strong tower or a strong fortress, the rich are sadly mistaken. And I can remember years ago, preachers would get off on something like this and say, you know, tomorrow you could lose everything you've got. When I say that today, it doesn't have the same effect, because you know what? We've got so many more safeguards in place today for our money and things. I mean, unless our whole cultural, economic, and everything just collapsed, not many of us are going to lose everything we've got. We might have a setback if we're in the stock market a lot, you know. So that doesn't really sell very well anymore, to try to go down that road with people. But even having said that, I want you to notice that Solomon says they imagine it to be a high wall of safety. And even if we put our hope, our security, our trust in our wealth, you don't have to look very far to find wealthy people who just really are miserable, do you? Wealth is no guarantee that we're going to live a good life. So it's not a place to put our trust. Yeah, it's nice to be able to know that we've got money in the bank, but it's not where we want our life's trust to rest, is it? And there's other places, there's other things in our culture that we look to for safety and security too. But Solomon's saying we need to look to the Lord, because he is our strong fortress. And he'll be the same tomorrow as he is today. Okay, the next three, they're all odd numbered, you'll notice. They all kind of deal with the same subject, so I've taken these three, 13, 15, and 17, and I've kind of put them here together. Spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish. Intelligent people are always ready to learn. Their ears are open for knowledge. The first to speak in court sounds right until the cross-examination begins. I love that. And I'm so guilty. I don't say guilty is not really the right word. But, you know, I'll listen even like when we're having the political debates, when the presidential debates. And I know some of you, you've already decided before you go in which one's going to be right all the way down the road. But I listen to them, and one of them will say something, I'll say, yeah, that's right. The other one will say something, like, yeah, that's right. You know, and what do you have to do? You got to just kind of take it all in and listen, don't you? Well, you don't have to, but I think that's the best way to do it. So have you ever heard a story? You've heard one side of a story, and you're convinced that is so true until you hear the other side of the story. In my line of work, and Beverly particularly in her line of work, when you're talking to people about marriage or someone, haven't had that much here, but people come in, you know, they're complaining about their church experience, or you know, politics is another area that we do this, and you hear one person's perspective and you think, yeah, I can really hear where you're coming, but then you hear the other person's perspective, and what do? You kind of got to weigh the evidence, don't you? And a wise person's going to do that. They're going to be discerning, because here's what happens, and it's just human nature, and you can't fault people for doing it. If I'm in a situation where I'm trying to convince you of something, I'm only going to tell you the assets. I'm only going to tell you the things that are going to make me come out looking good, right? And the person on the other side of the issue, they're going to do the same thing. Listen, I don't want to get myself in trouble politically tonight, but let's just be honest. That's what's happening with media things. It's not fake media. They're not lying on the other side. They're telling their slant of things. And so the other side's telling their slant of things. This is what happens. And that's why, to me, it's dangerous to just listen to one side. We need to listen to what different people are bringing to the discussion before we determine what the truth is about something. That can also be the case, John. But don't always just assume the first thing you hear is the truth. And here's for sure something that we need to get from this. You know, back in Deuteronomy 19 and verse 15, the Lord requires, way back there, He requires 2 witnesses for any legal decision to be made. Well, what's the wisdom in that? Well, you're not going to just have one person bringing their slanted point of view. Because you can't trust the testimony of only one person. And again, I'm not even going to say it's because they're lying. It's because they're stating what they're stating from one perspective. Well, how they feel is part of it, yeah. Because in our flesh, we always want to put ourselves in the best possible light. So, let me give you some basic principles for making sound decisions. First of all, get the facts before answering. Secondly, be orderly. Make sure you hear both sides. This is what Scripture was as being discerning. Okay? Verse 14. The human spirit can endure a sick body. That is profound. Pain cannot even compare to my times of emotional pain. This statement's about, we'll get over a sick body. Man, when you get crushed in spirit. Verse 19. An offended friend is harder to win than a fortified city. And haven't we all been there? Where we've said something that's hurt a person that we love. And it sometimes want it to be, right? In Solomon's day, strong cities were surrounded by walls. We've seen the walls of Jericho, some of us. And, having and Solomon's saying, boy, winning back a person that you've hurt's just about as hard. But what's the implication? Yeah, it goes back to watching our words, what we say. What'd you say, Dixie? Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yes. And there's got to be a relationship there to really do it, too. Yeah. Don't you love when people dig in on you, but then you've got us that way, in fact. Here we have yet another warning that we need to be careful what we say, because we might end up having to eat those words. And so we want those words to taste good. So here in America, we feel very strongly about the First Amendment, don't we? And I'm so glad we have a Constitution, that we have freedom of speech. But even from the days of the Founding Fathers, they tried to describe this in different things that they would bring up. Freedom of speech. But we feel like in this country, because of that, we have the right to blurt out anything, anywhere. And we do. As American citizens, we do. But when we took on Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, we have now entered into a subculture, a different culture. We don't take advantage of that right. And we can't just blurt out anything we feel. There's ways of saying things. There's ways of being kind. Isn't that the word you used? I mean, all that needs to come together under the influence of the Holy Spirit. He said, let everything you say be good and helpful. Oh man, I'd just like to sit down with some people right here in our church that I've seen post on Facebook, and I just want to say, tell me how that fits. Good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. But I have a right as an American to say what I want. And remember, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Which means that not only can my words destroy you, Mike, they can destroy me. My words can destroy me. What we looked at in Matthew a while ago, Jesus said, isn't it? And I wish every Christian, I wish every member of this church would consider that in our face-to-face conversation, written on our foreheads. Verse 22. The man who finds a wife finds a treasure, and he receives favor from Yahweh. And this is God's will for every marriage, obviously. Relate to this verse. I mean, I don't say that in any way, but in total compassion. That this was always true for every person. But I do know that it's God's desire for every person. I do know that this is why God is this great treasure of marriage. Is because He knows the potential in it and what it can be like. And those of us who have been, time, I ought to also say, you women who have received a husband who is a treasure, have been blessed with favor from the Lord, right? Out way back, Mike. I think it was probably around the time that Adam and Eve were around that even if women were, for me, it's kind of more subservient. Boy, I'm glad Beverly's not here. However, she'd probably be amen in that. Destroy each other, but a real friend sticks closer than a brother. Yeah. And I don't know that there's anywhere more lonely than in a crowd. In fact, I want to tell you this story. And this isn't to fault anybody. It's just what can often happen. But when we used to have our meet and greets, y'all remember that we'd standing in that auditorium when other people were greeting and talking, and I would be by myself. I'm not indicting us. That just sometimes, unfortunately, that happens in a large group of people. But there's nothing like the loneliness of being alone in a crowd. And friend or friends, in good times and bad. We all need that, don't we? And so let's realize that not only is this saying that it's nice for us to have a friend like that, what this is also saying to me is I need to be looking for ways I can be in our prayers. Wait, I maybe shouldn't do it like that because then you're not going to, I'm not going to say anything toward the end of class. Thanks, Craig.